This is QTV and time now for the news. Thank you for staying with us. The Zambia Center for Inter-Party Dialogue, ZCID, says it is still engaging with the church mother bodies on chairing the Presidential Dialogue Summit. First consignment of ballot papers for the July 26th elections has arrived in the country. The Center for Trade Policy Development, CTPD, says the delegation of ministers to travel to China to discuss Zambia's data structuring is too large. Here now is the news in detail. To take you through the news, my name is Machamanda. The Zambia Center for Inter-Party Dialogue, ZCID, says it is still engaging with the church on chairing the Presidential Dialogue Summit. ZCID spokesperson Jackson Silabwe says the ZCID is following the mandate it was given by the Constitution that the church be brought on board and the dialogue process. Mr. Silabwe says the center also holds the view that if the dialogue meeting among political leaders is going to stand a test of time, it should be all-inclusive. In an interview with QTV News by telephone, Mr. Silabwe says, to this effect, the ZCID has been meeting with various individual church mother bodies. Mr. Silabwe says, the ZCID last Tuesday met with the Council of Churches in Zambia, CCZ, the Evangelical Fellowship of Zambia, EFZ, and the Zambia Conference of Catholic Bishops, ZCCB. He says that the ZCID expects to hear from the three church mother bodies in the course of this week. Mr. Silabwe states that the ZCID will therefore not give the date on which the Presidential Summit will be held until it conclusively resolves the issue of chairing the summit with the church.
If you understand, we as ZCID want to be all-inclusive. So we are only going to announce the date for the summit. The summit of presidents is not for sure. It's not just for an activity. The summit of presidents should be a summit where leaders, political leaders, are going to interact freely without any impediment. And as a center, we want to work on those impediments before that summit takes place. Otherwise, it'll just be a show, and we don't want it to be a show. We want it to be an historical event that is going to bring leaders together in national interest. So we are not going to announce the date of the Summit of Presidents until these processes are exhausted. But I can assure you that it's going to take place as soon as possible.
Ballot papers for the 26th July elections have arrived in the country. The Emirates cargo plane carrying the ballot papers touched down at Kenneth Kaunda International Airport at exactly 14:35 hours. And the opposition UPND and the National Democratic Congress NDC shunned the arrival of the ballot papers at Kenneth Kaunda International Airport despite being invited. Only the ruling Patriotic Front and the United Prosperous and Peaceful Zambia were present at the airport to witness the arrival of the ballot papers. Representatives from ruling PF and the UPPZ described the process as transparent. UPPZ National Elections Committee member John Kalwena said he was happy with the process thus far, while PF Vice Secretary for the Elections Committee Brian Katunasa said the party is now looking forward to the by-elections. The first consignment of the ballot papers had 16 ballots, which the second one, which is expected in the country tomorrow, will comprise 11 ballots. More in the following report.
Ballot papers for the July by-elections have arrived in the country. They arrived this afternoon amid tight security as well as presence from various political party agents who are going to take part in these by-elections.
The ballot papers arrived today, 16th of July 2018 at exactly 14:35 aboard flight Emirates EK0713. The ruling PF and the opposition United Prosperous for Peaceful Zambia UPPZ sent their representatives to witness the arrival of the ballot papers, while the NDC and UPND representatives were nowhere to be seen. Electoral agents both from the UPPZ and the PF described the process as transparent. UPPZ National Elections Committee member Kalwena John told Q News that he was happy with the process thus far, while PF's Vice Secretary for Elections Committee Brian Katunasa said the party is now looking forward to the by-elections.
To the task. We are happy with the process so far, and we are awaiting now the verification of these ballot papers. And all we can say is that we wish all our candidates as PF that they are going to perform and that they are going to come out as winners because
Before day, to see our youngest candidate, one Madel Super, getting voted. So we're happy about it, and we are yet to wait for tomorrow, open them and see what is inside.
The consignment, which arrived in the country today, had 16 pallets, while the last consignment expected in the country tomorrow, the 17th of July 2018, has 11 pallets. For QTV News, I'm Alfred Mwansa.
A financial analyst, Blessings Kafwanka, has urged governments to be more assertive in implementing austerity measures. Mr. Kafwanka says the recent assurance by President Edgar Lungu to China that debt restructuring will not disturb any Chinese projects will compromise the efforts being put in place to reduce on debt accumulation. He says there is need for governments to be more assertive in implement austerity measures and ensure that every angle through which the country accrues debt is looked at, including Chinese finance, which forms a significant amount of Zambia's external debt. Mr. Kafwanka is optimistic that if the austerity measures are assertively implemented, this will help in obtaining the IMF financial package and the benefits will be overwhelming.
We realize that from the statement that was recently released by the President, His Excellency, President Edgar Lungu, that these measures will not affect Chinese finance, and consequently a team made up of about 5 ministers was dispatched to China to go and give them an assurance that the implementation of the debt restructuring strategy will not affect the Chinese finance. I think that particular decision that was made is a decision that is going to compromise the efforts that are being made to reduce the rate at which we are incurring debt. Chinese finance, apart from the Eurobonds and other sources of sovereign debt, you realize that Chinese finance forms a very significant part of our external debt that we have as a nation. So excluding China from the entire equation will actually frustrate the efforts that we are actually making to come up with a debt restructuring program that is going to assist us in reducing the amount of debt at the rate at which we are accruing debt. So I think there is need for us to be a little bit more assertive and to ensure that every angle where we've actually been incurring debt is looked at. There is no need for us to begin to exclude certain creditors, especially Chinese finance, considering the fact that a larger chunk of our external debt comes from China.
Meanwhile, the Center for Trade Policy and Development, CTP Executive Director Isaac Mwaipopo, says while the decision to send a delegation of ministers to China to discuss the restructuring program of Zambia's debt is welcome, the delegation is too large. Mr. Mwaipopo has reminded the government of the need to be mindful of the numbers of ministers and other government officials making international trips on government expense. He says 2 ministers from Finance and Foreign Affairs with a few technocrats could be sent on the mission to China. Mr. Mwaipopo says the decision to send the delegation to discuss the debt restructuring program is welcome, considering that 30% of Zambia's external debt is owed to China. He says this serves as an acknowledgement on the part of government of the growing debt problem. The Zambia Institute for Labour Research and Development, ZILAD, has urged governments to consider coming up with a living wage for workers in the country. ZILAD Programs and Communications Manager Francis Piri says the government should also spearhead the process of revising upwards the minimum wage that was last reviewed in 2012. Mr. Piri tells QTV News that his organization is advocating for a living wage as opposed to a minimum wage. He says in the absence of a living wage, it is imperative that the government quickly revises the minimum wage as the economic fundamentals have changed over time.
And as Zambia Institute for Labour Research and Development, it's part of our advocacy trying to see that the place of work is no longer considered as the place of struggle. We are moving from an area of looking at the minimum, the decent. We are trying to promote the decent work agenda promotion, and we are advocating for we are trying to advocate for a living wage rather than a minimum wage. That is our key area. And in our maiden research, which we launched on the 25th of April, one of the recommendations that we gave was we made it clear that it's high time for the government to review the minimum wage. And we are looking at even issues to do with social protection. We are looking at, they all center at, the central person here is a worker. So if the worker is empowered, all these issues are going to be resolved. And
the Civil Society for Poverty Reduction, CSPR, says social protection is key to poverty alleviation, hence the need for stakeholders to promote such interventions. CSPR Advocacy and Communications Officer Maxon Nkoma notes that despite robust annual growth in the recent past, poverty levels in the country remain stubbornly high. Mr. Nkoma has told QTV News that social protection is a fundamental human right to the citizens. He says social protection is also key to reducing inequality in the country. He has since implored those in authority to prioritize social protection programs. Details in the following report.
The United Nations Framework for Sustainable Development Goals has identified social protection as a critical instrument to reduce poverty, vulnerability, and tackle inequality. Many countries around the world and several in the African region are embarking on ambitious process to reform and extend their social protection system. At the request of the African Union, the United Nations system has promoted the development of a social protection capacity building package called Transform Leadership and Transformation Learning Package on building and managing social protection in Africa. The objective of the Transform project is to build critical thinking and capacities of policymakers and national stakeholders to improve the design, effectiveness, and efficiency of social protection systems in Africa. Social protection is considered as a critical component of governance in this country and many other countries. Achieving poverty reduction requires a shift in the development paradigm with focused and coherent strategies and sustainable commitment and enhanced political will. The role of civil society organizations and the media and governance has been widely recognized as essential because a well-organized civil society and the media can have a positive influence on the state and the economies. It is for this reason that the International Labour Organization, in collaboration with the Civil Society for Poverty Reduction, organized a 5-day training on social protection for CSOs and the media in Zambia district. And CSPR Advocacy and Communications Officer Maxon Nkoma said social protection is key to poverty alleviation and hence the need to promote such interventions.
But also to engage with our key decision makers in the districts, in the provinces as it were, begin to appreciate the fundamental human rights that exist as far as ensuring that every Zambian has access to basic needs. So for us, I think it was an eye-opener, and we are glad that it will enrich the content of our programming towards social protection, but also particularly that our advocacy work will be sharpened.
And some of the CSOs who attended the training have expressed optimism that the training will help them in their advocacy.
More importantly, it has also given us a platform to share principles of disability inclusion to other stakeholders, such as our colleagues from other CSOs who are not coming from our sector, who might not fully understand and appreciate the important need of mainstreaming disability in their programs. And I think that it has given us the tools that we require to effectively hold the government accountable for its promises in terms of what they've committed to do in line with international instruments, as well as strengthening the local environment for the delivery of social protection programs.
So that should be able to help me then pass on that information to the media and help them understand more about social protection so that we enhance the debate as an organization, MISA Zambia, towards issues to do with social protection and their importance. And basically it also enhances one of the key aspects of our core business, that is access, the right of access to information for citizens.
I feel I'd be able to use the content of the workshop very well in my work. Initially, my mind was more on social protection, had to do mainly with people that are disadvantaged or marginalized, but from this workshop I've come to learn that actually social protection is for anyone.
And the senior citizens were also represented, as these are the most stakeholders in need of social protection interventions.
We look at it as senior citizens. We see it from the rights perspective. Everybody has a right to an income. whether they are old or they are young. So we see that the older people have a right to an income in old age, and they need the government support because they are the most vulnerable.
Some of your mothers have come to fetch you.
For QTV News, Albert Mpezeni in Samba District, Central Province.
Police in Lusaka have instituted investigations into a case of murder where a male person identified as Brian Mulenga, aged 37, was found dead at Zesco Flyover Bridge along Great East Road by members of the public. Ms. Katongo says the incident is reported to have happened between 14th July 2018 around 20:30 hours and 15th July 2018 at 06 hours. She says the body of the deceased is lying in UTH mortuary awaiting postmortem. And in Mukushi, police have arrested 3 suspects identified as Bruce Kalunga, aged 24, Kelvin Changwe, aged 20, and Elias Mupeta, aged 25, in connection with the murder of Kaumambita, aged 50, a welder at Cropit Farm in Mukushi district. Ms. Katongo says the incident is reported to have happened on 15th July 2018 at 07 hours at Cropit Farms in Mukushi. She says the victim sustained a broken skull, cut on the right eye and the chin, as kicks and stones were allegedly used in the act. In another development, police in Chisamba are looking for a male adult only identified as Kings in connection with the murder of Sebastian Musonda, aged 20, of Miswa area in Chisamba district. Ms. Katongo says the suspect is reported to have used a chain in the act and the victim sustained a cut on the forehead. She says this occurred on 14th July 2018 around 22 hours at Miswa area in Chisamba. The body is in Liteta Hospital mortuary awaiting postmortem. The Felix Mutati MMD faction says it is opposed to the suggestion that a law be enacted to limit the number of political parties in the country. Faction National Secretary Raphael Nakachinda says there is need to limit the number of political parties for the purposes of bringing sanity in the country's political dispensation. Mr. Nakachinda says the mushrooming political parties in the country have not caused any chaos that would require legislation to control. In an interview with QTV News, Mr. Nakachinda states that what Zambia needs instead is the institutionalization of political parties. He says this entails the operationalization of the Political Parties Act. Mr. Nakachinda says the Political Parties Act will provide criteria for which a political party can receive funding from government.
The solution to that impasse and the mushrooming of different political parties is basically just for us to institutionalize the operations of political parties by way of this time around operationalizing the Political Parties Act, which provides for funding of political parties. Political parties, there must be a criteria through which political parties qualify for public funding. That criteria itself will be able to eliminate those who are not really into politics and forming political parties for purposes of forming government. They are maybe just there for malicious purposes. That in itself will cure the problem. But you can't stop people from deciding to align themselves to a political party or indeed forming a political party. The solution.
Minister of Home Affairs Deputy Permanent Secretary Willis Manjimela has expressed optimism that government will meet the demands of the Nelson Mandela rules on the treatment of inmates. Speaking at the handover of donated items to Lusaka Central Correctional Facilities by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, UNODC, Mr. Manjimela says government will ensure that it brings sanity in correctional facilities in order to fight the disease burden, especially waterborne and airborne diseases. He has commended UNODC's efforts at reducing some of the challenges the Zambia Correctional Service has been facing in as far as providing quality correctional services to the inmates it's concerned. Among the donated items include 10 inline chlorinators, 25 kg bags of UTH granular chlorine, 2,000 by 175 grams tablets of Dettol soap, 500 units pesticides eliminators, all worth $30,000 US.
I must state that the UNODC has been very consistent in its programs with the correction service through donations of various items and the provision of technical support and capacity building in trainings to correction officers in the area of health and other good practices in prison management. For example, the UNODC has been orienting correction officers on the key united normative guidelines related to the correction reforms like the Nelson Mandela rules on treatment of inmates. Distinguished invited guests, I'm aware that 18th July 2018 is the Nelson Mandela Day, and Zambia Correction Service will commemorate this day from Livingstone together with the sports and cultural games with their Namibian counterparts. Therefore, this donation by UNODC is a great gift to the inmates as we commemorate the Nelson Mandela Day. With such donations, we are confident as government that we are on course in meeting the demands of the Nelson Mandela rules on the treatment of inmates. For example, Rule 15 of the Nelson Mandela rules demands that the sanitary installations shall be adequate to enable every prisoner to comply with the needs of nature when necessary and in a clean and decent manner.
Speaking at the same event, UNDOC National Coordinator in Zambia, Sharon Nyambe, says it is the responsibility of the member states to make a difference in the lives of prisoners following reforms going on in many countries to ensure that prisons move from penal facilities to correctional facilities. She says the ultimate purpose of imprisonment is undermined in prisons, which were overstretched and poorly managed. Ms. Nyambe says the UNDOC has developed pictorial posters to raise awareness on Nelson Mandela rules and will be launched on the 18th of July 2018 to mark the birthday of Nelson Mandela.
UNODC developed pictorial posters which we've lined up against the wall. This is to raise awareness on the important elements to enhance prisoners' rights and also to showcase the important work that prison staff do. The posters will be launched globally on the 18th of July, and I'm happy to note that with Zambia being a beneficiary, we are also handing over components of these posters through USAT to the Zambia Correctional Service. It is also important to note, sir, that within the UN family, UNODC is responsible for HIV prevention among people who use drugs and also in prison settings. We were challenged to respond to improving sanitation in prison when we acknowledged with appreciation the effort that the Zambian government made to prevent a cholera outbreak within your correctional facilities.
Earlier, Zambia Correctional Service Lusaka Regional Deputy Commissioner Crispin Kaonga thanked UNDOC for being consistent in their programming towards improving the welfare of the inmates.
Today, sir, the organization is here again donating assorted items worth over $30,000 aimed at improving hygiene and nutrition among our inmates. Among the items donated include the following. We have chlorinators, we have HT granular chlorine, we have liquid chlorine, we have liquid Dettol and Dettol soap, we have bottles of hand sanitizers, we have packets of washing detergent pastes, we have pesticide eliminators, and we also have soya supplements. Sir, as you are aware, sir, the 18th of July signifies the day that the International Corrections Family in Africa commemorates the Nelson Mandela International Day, and for the record, also other global partners and other correctional services across the globe.
The UN standard minimum rules for the treatment of prisoners were named after the South African icon who spent 27 years in prison in order to honor his legacy. An 18-year-old pupil of Kafue Day High School in Kafue District has pleaded guilty to 2 counts of trafficking in 75.6 grams of marijuana and 1.6 grams of heroin in Lusaka Magistrate Court. The juvenile was found in possession of the drugs on the 16th of July 2018. Appearing before the magistrate Maka Mikalile for plea, the boy, who was accompanied to court by his mother, admitted committing all the offences. He told the court that he was using the drugs for smoking. Magistrate Mikalile has since set Thursday, 19th July 2018, as the date for proper establishment of facts and submission of a report by the Department of Social Welfare. She has further asked the mother of the child to take a leading role in the matter to ensure that a report from the social welfare is before the court on the actual day. Turkish ambassador to Zambia, Sebnem Enchesu, says the Turkish government stands ready to share technical support to the Zambian government in the agriculture and tourism sectors. Speaking during a press briefing in Lusaka, Ms. Enchesu says has also observed the need for both the Zambian and the Turkish governments to continue with high-level bilateral visits in order to enhance cooperation. Ms. Enchesu says Turkey and Zambia continue to enjoy good political relations resulting in mutual understanding. She adds that the recent visit to Turkey by President Edgar Lungu and his subsequent holding of bilateral talks was productive. Meanwhile, Ms. Enchesu has thanked the Zambian government for their continued support after the failed coup in that country 2 years ago that left over 250 people dead and thousands wounded.
I just wanted to touch upon this because I would like to emphasize that Turkey very much gives importance to the development of relations with Zambia, and through visits of such high level, we just believe that such high level visits are very useful in order to give impetus to our relations. On that account, the visit of His Excellency and the visit of the Minister was very valuable and very important for Turkey. And also it shows the common will of both countries to continue in that direction. And we hope that in the very near future we might have bilateral visits as well. A visit from Turkey to Zambia, as well as a visit from Zambia to Turkey, where all the aspects of the bilateral relations can be discussed thoroughly.
The Senior Citizens Association of Zambia, SCARS, has called on the government and other stakeholders to consider targeting HIV and AIDS messages at older people as they too are at risk of getting the virus. SCARS Executive Director Rosemary Sishimba tells Q News that it is unfortunate that this group of the population is left out when it comes to HIV and AIDS related messages, as if they are not affected. Mrs. Sishimba says it is a myth to assume that old people are not sexually active when they are also dying of HIV and AIDS. She has also bemoaned the lack of health services to cater for old people as one of the challenges facing the elderly in the country. Mrs. Sishimba says old people feel shy to engage health workers, more especially with regards to sexual-related ailments. Therefore, they need to have elderly health workers who are in the operation and can freely engage on such illnesses.
There is a myth that older people are not sexually active. This is not true. Older people are sexually active and they are exposed to the same risks as the young people. And yet, in the HIV and AIDS response, ages from 50 upwards are not included. So you find that older people now even start stigmatizing themselves. They don't even want, even if they can see signs in them, they wouldn't like to go for testing because the environment in the testing area is not conducive. It is populated by young people, and they feel embarrassed to start talking about their sexuality with young people. So we would like government to make it possible for older people access HIV and AIDS services, also to have tailor-made, preventive and preventive messages directed at the older generation.
The Prisons Care and Counselling Association, PRISCA, has called on the Electoral Commission of Zambia to start registering remandees and convicted prisoners as voters. PRISCA Executive Director Dr. Godfrey Malembeka has told QTV News that despite the ruling by the Constitutional Court that remandees and convicted prisoners who have appealed their cases will now be allowed to vote in elections. Nothing is being done to ensure that these people are registered as voters. Dr. Malembeka says there is need for the Zambia Correctional Service Commissioner General to undertake a vigorous mobilization exercise and sensitize their prisoners on the need to register as voters. He says his organization expected prisoners to participate in the forthcoming mayoral by-election and other elections the country is having. Dr. Malembeka says the ECZ should have used the mayoral by-election as an opportunity to perfect the tools they are developing so that they know what to do as 2021 draws closer.
Commissioner General has done, Zambia Correctional Services, that is working in partnership with the Electoral Commission of Zambia, and they have invited the Department of National Registration and Citizens, they have invited Zambia Police, they have invited some of us as petitioners. I went to court, as you know, to the Constitutional Court, and that judgment was passed in our favor to allow suspects in police cells and prisoners to vote. So what has happened is great. It is another landmark because they should be allowed to choose leaders of their choice. Currently, we've seen very good will from the current government, but we may not know in future. Now, when you allow them to vote, this will encourage future politicians to pay attention because there's their vote there. And so we are very happy. It is another human rights that has been done in line with the change, the paradigm shift. We are very happy. We expected even actually prisoners in Lusaka to participate in the mayoral election, and I issued that statement. But we've done our part as advocates. We've done the advocacy. We leave this with government. We want them to speed up the process. We should have used this opportunity to perfect the tools they are developing so that we now know what to do as we get closer to the general election in 2021. Commissioner General.
The National Democratic Congress, NDC, is concerned with the delays in the construction of chiefs' palaces countrywide. The construction of the 288 palaces started in 2014 and was earmarked to be completed in 2016. NDC General Secretary Mwenya Msenge has told Q News that over 1.2 billion kwacha was set aside for this well-meaning project, but wondered why the construction of the palaces has stalled under President Edgar Lungu. Mr. Mwenya says his party is still waiting for a response from the Chief and Traditional Affairs Minister on the inquiry it made last year with regards to this matter. He says the minister had promised to give an affirmative response on the matter. Mr. Msenge says traditional rulers deserve better and the construction of their palaces is thus non-negotiable. He says it is unfortunate that government has subjected the traditional leadership to live under stressful and deteriorating conditions. The newly elected Zambia National Students Union, ZANASU leadership, has pledged to end the culture of riots at higher learning institutions in the country. ZANASU Secretary General Isaac Mwanza has told Q News that the new union leadership will seek to improve dialogue between government, tertiary institutions, managements, and the students. Mr. Mwanza, who is also Young Africa's Leaders Initiative Yali governance advisor, states that communication breakdown between students and the government is the cause of student unrest. He says there is need to therefore address the issue of communication, and Mr. Mwanza says the new ZANASU leadership also wants to ensure that the students' voice and leadership in national governance is reinvigorated. He says students' unions must become a source for intelligent debate and contribute to social, political and economic development in the country.
We want to sit down with our students from all the universities through their various student unions and be able to tell them to say that the riots are never a solution. Demonstration is a citizen's right, and every citizen has a right to demonstrate. But we are saying you cannot go and demonstrate and break people's properties on the street. So we must be able to find a decent way, a good way in which we can have our students air their grievances, at the same time for government to be able to listen to them. The failure of this dialogue between government and the students is what leads to the riots. So once government is able to listen, once the students are able to understand that their concerns are being addressed, I think that we are going to minimize on the friction that causes the violence, the riots that are taking place. Otherwise, we do not believe that it is a solution. We feel bad whenever we see the people who are innocent, their cars being broken in.
The right time concludes our news this hour, but before I take a run, here is a recap of stories in the headlines. The Zambia Center for Inter-Party Dialogue, ZCID, says it is still engaging with the church mother bodies on chairing the Presidential Dialogue Summit. First consignment of ballot papers for the July 26th elections has arrived in the country. And the Center for Trade Policy, Trade Development, CTPD, says the delegation of ministers to travel to China to discuss Zambia's debt restructuring is too large. That will do it for the news. Bye-bye. God bless.